everyone. I am Lisa Anna Palmer, also known as the VP Coach, founder of Light Your Leadership Inc., author of Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership, and creator of the LYLTalks podcast. Today's topic is about elevating women's leadership with our amazing guest, Solange Tuyishime Kieta of Elevate International. Welcome, Solange.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
It's definitely an honor and a pleasure to have you as a guest here on Little Talks. We go a ways back, and you've always been an amazing, inspiring friend. And just before we dive in, I'd like to say a few words about your background, if that's okay.
Sure.
Well, Solange has had quite a journey in her life. After surviving a war and genocide at 11 years old, Solange made a commitment to make the world better. So, as a mother, she experienced the greatest loss of a child. And she came through that in a journey of resilience, which has guided her to realize that the biggest issues in this world are affecting women and girls. And yet, they're rarely sitting at the leadership table. So this led Solange to birth and become the founder and president and CEO of Elevate International as part of her commitment to advance women and girls globally. Solange is an award-winning leader, a philanthropist. She's amazing. She's a global influencer, a Goodwill Ambassador for UNICEF Canada. She has a passion for pageantry and has held several titles, including the former Miss Canada, Mrs. Canada International, and Mrs. World. Solange focuses on creating a better world for everyone by inspiring leaders to adopt a culture of humanity first and gender equity at all leadership tables. Solange, once again, it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you here as a guest on Little Talks.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. What a wonderful introduction. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Solange, let's begin. If you could please share more about your leadership journey with us. How did it all begin?
I think my leadership journey begins when I'm 11. Really, I think it's one of those things, I'm right there and we just survived one of the most horrendous time in history as a child, just watching human beings do such horrible things to each other, but also losing it all and going from having a peaceful, loving, kind, beautiful home to sleeping in a tent in the middle of a chaos. I think it changes everything for you. So when I think about that 11-year-old that says, if I survive this, I will dedicate my life to making this world a better place. I think that's where leadership really started, because then I knew that I had a purpose beyond my circumstances. So that becomes my guiding light all through life. And it becomes this voice that always told me, you're more than the current circumstances. And that is really something I've leaned on. Even now, I look at it 30 years later, it's still the voice that I lean on. Even this year, it was the voice that I leaned on. You're more than your circumstances, and you're meant to do great things in this world. That's where my leadership begins. And I knew that it was founded in such great values, because it says, if I survive this, I will dedicate my life to making this world a better place. And it meant that that was the values I was going to lead with. Everything that I do, how is it aligned to making this world a better place for me and for all people?
Solange, I think it's incredible that as a young girl at 11 years old, you had this thought that if you survive this, you're going to make the world a better place for others.
Mhm.
That's a profound experience for anyone to have, especially as a young child, for sure. And so tell us more about this amazing organization that you founded called Elevate International. What's his mission and what is the impact you seek to make?
It's interesting, actually. So, let me go back a little bit. You literally just said it's interesting and fascinating that at 11 years old, a girl has that vision. And I think it comes to even a greater conversation when we think about leadership. One, yes, there is still work to be done in being inclusive, but two, there's a lot of work to be done on our little girls keeping those promises to themselves.
Mhm.
Because often, even, I mean, we can apply it to all young people, but predominantly girls in many parts of the world. When you say, I want to be the first astronaut, or I want to be the first doctor for my village, or I want to be the first, international lawyer for my country. And people are like, well, who are you kidding? But for me, it demonstrates that when young girls tell you their dreams, believe them the first time and
Mm.
help them hang on to it. Because often people think, well, how did she or how did someone become the first female president of Pepsi? Or how did someone become the first female president of their country? Well, they had a dream and a vision and they hung on to it. And it wasn't just them by themselves. Along the way, there was a village and incredible people who helped them flourish and realize that dream. So I think that becomes really, really important about what we say to our girls, what we say to the next generation of leaders about believing in something that we might not see, but they've seen it themselves and they can birth it, which comes back to Elevate International. For me, I felt like I had already seen humanity at its worst through just the chaos and surviving a genocide and watching just devastation and people lose everything. I already knew that we needed to be better human beings so that will never be repeated, but also those who survive will live a different life. They won't just survive, but they will thrive. And I could see clearly that there are millions of people. Once I survived, I could see clearly that there are millions of people who are living devastations in the world. So it's like, how do we create better leaders? But at the same time, I knew that women and girls rarely had a say in the outcome of their lives. So when I became pregnant with our identical triplets, I thought one, I thought it was something that I didn't think it was like something that could happen naturally. So I thought it was just very strange. 1 in 2 million women to to get pregnant with identical triplets naturally. So I just assumed my life had already been a sum of many surprises. So this was just another surprise in my life. But I think through that journey, just seeing how I was well taken care of obviously being in Canada now, seeing how I had a specialist that looked after me through the entire pregnancy. Um, and also looking at like the appointments I had in the beginning, there were once a month and then once every few weeks, then once every week, then like every day, just to keep me and the babies alive. A part of me really thought about what would have happened if I had been a woman pregnant with identical triplets during the time that we went through the war and genocide. Like what would have happened? Clearly we wouldn't have survived because there were so many positive and professional interactions in there that helped us all survive. So I knew through that pregnancy that I would dedicate my life to elevating women and girls and advocating for children globally. And I was already doing that work with UNICEF. But I feel that for me, in that moment when the girls were born, and it was like the greatest joy of our lives, watching three babies come to life in 5 minutes, it was a miracle in itself. But I felt like, a few weeks later, losing one of our children was the most devastating and probably most painful moment that a human can experience. Like that became very clear. I had I had seen it all. When we lose everything, when you see atrocities, when we see human beings do the most horrible things to each other, but as a mother losing a child, it was a pain that was almost incomprehensible. And I remember saying, I would never wish that upon my worst enemy. But yet in that same moment, I thought about just even being able to be present through our daughter passing through the next life. And I realized the number of women we talk about every day who lose children from preventable causes. We always said 3,000 mothers lose a baby every day, 3,000 mothers lose. And I thought, how have we made this? How have we normalized this type of conversation? What can we do to make sure that 3,000 mothers every day, if you multiply that by 360 days, those numbers become. And now, if you start looking at the numbers of children that are lost every year from preventable causes, that number become even more. And I said, well, we need to do something about this. And I think Elevate International was a combination of two things. It was one, just giving my life a deeper meaning, because there was no way I was going to be able to live in this life without giving my life a deeper purpose. I did not want my life to be a sum of painful moments. So I felt that through the loss of our daughter, there was this birth of this organization that was now committed to advancing women and girls globally, because I knew how much suffering is happening in the world. And I also knew that to genuinely create change in this world, we need to change how the decisions are being made about us, for us, and for all people. And in order to change the decisions that are being made and how those decisions are being made, we need all people at the leadership table. And women and girls are not at that leadership table. In fact, women are rarely at that leadership table. If you look at the largest corporations or even all leaders, global leaders of this world, there's always maybe like a handful of women, which how do you expect those voices to be elevated if there are just a few of them? So I figured, one, if we are intentional about advancing women as leaders in our society, decisions will look a lot different. And two, if we genuinely elevate leaders that are human centered and heart centered, decisions will look a lot different. So that was Elevate. I knew we wanted to create a better world, and I want to be a part of creating a better world for all people. And that involves making sure that women are part of the decision makers in this world, but also our champions and allies are leaders from all sectors, all identities, but they're heart centered and human centered.
Hmm. What an important message. And thank you so much, Solange, for sharing your journey, the painful parts of it. My heart goes out to you every time you speak about your little girl and the loss you suffered, and how you took that as fuel and inspiration to make lives better for other women and girls and people in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, your remark about women are not at the table is so true. So how do we get there? Like, what's holding women back from being at that leadership table, in your opinion?
Honestly, for the longest time, we used to hear like things about, women need to be more confident and women need to be more passionate and women need to like have stronger voices. But I don't think that's the case. Like we're we're focusing on the aftermath of a generation of people who are being told to dim their light. So if I'll give you an example. Growing up, I was one of those people, I'm very polite, kind, and everything else, but I also speak my mind. If I spoke my mind, someone, and I remember hearing this, someone would say, oh, well, she has a bit of an attitude.
Mm.
But it took that I was surrounded by an incredible parents and family who just said, well, no, she kind of just said that something was wrong there and she advocated for herself. But if a boy said the same thing, he was a leader, he was courageous.
Mhm.
Had I not grown in an environment where they recognized that my voice came with a lot of respect, but also stood up for herself, I would have dimmed my light a long time ago. So by the time I'm a leader, of course, I'm going to hesitate speaking up my mind. Of course, I'm going to hesitate challenging a CEO or another leader at the table. So it's not that I lack confidence. It's because society told me this is not good and we do not appreciate it from you. So for many, we internalize that. So, one, we need to make sure that we always tell boys and girls when they speak up their mind, with respect, of course, that it's valued all the time. We need to remove those biases. And courageous girls don't get to be um, girls with attitude or girls with X, Y, and Z. We need to stop that completely. So we elevate a generation of people who knows I need to be kind, respectful, and I also need to stand up for myself. And I need to voice change when I see it. And it needs to be appreciated as a leader. So that's number one from the get go. Because now we're in a generation where we're talking about having a pipeline issue. Well, why do we have a pipeline issue? It starts from the beginning. And then when we look at today, we also need to look at that organizations and societies still have a structure that does not invite women and celebrate the leadership they bring to the table. We're used to a certain type of leadership. Leadership is tough. Leadership, there's no emotions in business or in leadership. But that's the beauty of what we bring to the table. We care for people, we nurture for people, and we still get things done. Caring does not mean that we do not care about the advancement of an organization and its prosperity. It means that we actually care about nurturing the people who come along with us to create this beautiful society and organization. So I think when we think about human resources strategies and culture, we need to also recognize that leadership is going to look different and we can have different approaches and strategy to achieve the same results and sometimes even better. I think COVID proved it. Organization that had more women in senior leadership positions survived and thrived because it was a season where you actually needed to care about how that human beings feels who's been isolated and who has a 4-year-old and a 15-year-old who are driving them crazy and they still need to execute at home and they haven't gone out and they haven't seen friends. You needed to care about their mental health and still coach them and mentor them through achieving the success of their own personal and professional goals and their organization. So I think we really need to think about the cultures that we're advancing in our society and in organization to recognize that women's leadership will look different and one woman does not represent all women. And we just need to be open to all types of leadership to achieve incredible results.
Absolutely. So many great messages in what you just shared. There's one I'd like to, maybe we can dig in a little bit more and unpack that
Mhm.
question about emotions at work, because that's certainly something that I know as women we get, and I quote unquote, accused of having emotions. And the reality is that everybody has emotions at work, unless they're, diagnosed with certain conditions. The thing is that sometimes they're buried. And when those emotions are buried, they're still there. They just come out in other ways. Certainly as a leadership coach, I see this all the time, is that, I'll get situations where a client will say, well, emotions don't belong at work. And then after working together for a while, we see and start unpacking that, yeah, they do belong there. They're there. And we need to recognize them, know how to deal with them. Um, Welcome them, and be able to truly embrace them. And that will make a huge difference in leadership. And you're right, a lot of women tend to have the natural ability to deal with their emotions. Now, there's different ways that they show up. So sometimes, and I think that to demystify emotions at work, sometimes women are accused of being too kind, too compassionate. Certainly, I've heard many times when I was on fast track to leadership how I needed to become mean to get ahead, how I needed to look after number one to get ahead and step on others, basically. And I rejected that notion. And in a lot of ways, while the system is constructed this way now, after generations of women being told that they need to be mean to get ahead, and some
Mm.
opt out, remain in middle management, they're fantastic people leaders. They decide they don't want to apply for promotions. Other times they do decide to apply, but it's held against them that maybe they would have shown an emotion once in a meeting 3 years ago. And also the ones who do get ahead, well, sometimes they start to take on certain characteristics or behaviors that go counter to the type of leadership we want to have in organizations. So let's talk a little bit more about how women can support each other and elevate one another in organizations.
There is no emotion that goes unnoticed. But also, let's back it up for a minute. It's interesting that when we're kind, when we're loving, or when we cry, when we hurt, it's an emotion. But the leader that was rude, that was mean, that responded in a way that hurt other people, or that didn't care about how they made other people feel, whether through an email, whether through the decisions they made, we do not consider that an emotion. They're
Oh,
all emotions.
well, let's
Do
stop
you
right.
understand?
That's an aha moment right there for a lot of people, I'm sure. Okay, because it's true. You're absolutely right. When we label emotions at work, it's always kind of the more nurturing or emotions that are more visible and related to grief, sadness, whatever it might be, hurt. You're absolutely 100% right. Anger is an emotion. And it seems that in our society, that's an emotion that's not only more acceptable in organizations and in society as a whole, it's actually celebrated in some circumstances, unfortunately. And that's what's tearing people apart.
Right. So if you read history about how lands were conquered, how people were colonized, how like all these things of domination, fear-based emotions became acceptable.
Hmm.
I'm terrified. I can't go in that office. Well, we have to go through 700 like steps to reach that leader. All these things, this separation became acceptable, but it's still an emotion. How you treat people, how you made them feel, whether it was anger, whether you terrified them with fear, it's an emotion. Is it an acceptable emotion? I don't think so. I would want someone to be a leader that people will still respect you even when you show them love. Like fear is not the only guider or driver to respect. And in fact, true respect, authentic respect is earned because I respected you. I respected your time. I respected your work. And I was willing to be open about your approach. You will respect me too. But I feel that we confuse these things where people tell like, well, women are emotional. Men are emotional.
Hmm.
Everybody is emotional. Your emotion maybe showed up in a way of anger or the way you spoke, or you were still emotional. Maybe I cried with the same circumstances. Maybe I cried and you got angry. We're both emotional. So, how do we start recognizing that maybe what we need is a healthy environment so our emotion show up in a calm, loving manner that allow us to share ideas and thrive together.
Hmm.
And people don't like that because that a lot of leaders also won't like that because that requires work. It requires you to look deep down and say, when such and such, let's say when Lisa comes to me with this idea or this project, what filter am I using to understand her ideas or to solve a problem? Sometimes our filters are full of trauma or challenges that we've faced in the past, and we're not able to see things logically. So, in order for us to be able to thrive and live together in a calm manner, it requires you to do the work. So, you remove any filters of bias or trauma or etc. And it requires me to do that so we can have an intellectual conversation based on healthy emotions. And you tell that if you would have shared that like 15, 20 years ago, that's when they say, oh, well, what cocoon is she on? Like, we're not going to do this type, right? But hurt people hurt people.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
need to heal our internal wounds because that's what leadership requires us. As a leader, you are responsible for people, not just what they accomplish on paper, not just, oh, we had, $7 billion of revenue this year. No. How did the people who work for you thrive and feel better as human being and feel like they're contributing to this society? Then leadership becomes interesting.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to listening and trying to see the world through each other's lenses that you mentioned and filters and come to an understanding. Now, I before we go on, I just have to say this. The next time I see somebody yell or get angry at a meeting, I'm going to say, stop being so emotional. Why are you being so emotional?
What emotions are you feeling? Share them calmly. You don't have to be angry.
Right, right. But I think that's an important uh, topic that you brought up. It's
Mhm.
because, let's stop trying to accuse one another of who's more emotional and what's it look like, and instead do our inner work,
Yes.
heal our trauma, or do all the work we need to basically self-regulate and to create that space between the time that we get activated and that we have a response and
Hmm.
practice active listening so that that's where we can transcend the divide, so to speak. I mean, spending time with people who might not have the same views, I think is an important practice. And to spend time in that space without trying to argue and fight everything and trying to convince each other. Why not listen to one another's perspectives first and then
Hmm.
see where's the common ground and where there's differences, then there could be decisions made around that. But it doesn't have to be this big, dramatic thing where we're always finding opposition everywhere we go. And I think that's important from a women's perspective in terms of leadership, uh, getting more of us to the table is how do we help leaders and organizations to create that safe space so that there could be that kind of conversation and instead of going, oh, you're being emotional. Well, how about I sit here and understand what's your experience so that I can understand, why is it that you're expressing yourself in this way? And what's that expression? What effect is that having on me as a leader? And what do I need
Hmm.
to have an appropriate response so that we can maintain a good relationship here and move forward with this. So this is I think really fascinating and gets
Yeah.
to the heart of some of the things. Now I do want to pause and also talk about women having to support and uplift and elevate other women. We need to do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
I'm noticing um, in the last little while in situations where women were turning against each other, and that pains my heart. We
Yeah.
we can't afford to do that.
I always say a few things. One, we need to recognize that for women to be where we are in our society, there was a lot of fighting, and we stand on the shoulders of many incredible women. And we also have to understand that to get there, it was often there is a whole pie, and they tell us we only have this part of the pie. And only you or I can get there. So then it became this thing where, well, I'm in competition with you to be that one woman that sits on a table of 10 male leaders. And everybody was trying to survive. You're trying to climb, but the space is only so little. And that's sort of like what created that culture of trying to be in competition of each other because we feel like it's a space that we're given and only a few of us can get in there. And what I'm saying today is we need to realize this space, if it's given, how do we make sure that it's no longer given, but we're part of the ones that are creating the space? And we're making it larger and broader so that more women can enter in that space. And honestly, I believe that the more we do that, then we're putting power in our hands. Because do I want to be the only woman sitting at a leadership table? My gosh, no. I want five other more women to be sitting at that leadership table. So when we say something, it doesn't require John to repeat it and say, that's a great idea. Because when Solange said it the first time, everybody heard it. And my sisters in leadership or my colleagues in leadership said, that's a great idea the first time. So I think this ideology of always trying to go against each other, it defeats the purpose of advancing women in leadership. It defeats the purpose of advancing a society. Because when we go against each other already, it's already telling the person who didn't buy in, like they said, in this mission of advancing diversity and inclusion in leadership. They're like, well, look at what they're doing already. This is not great. We don't need this. Let's not give more reason for those who don't understand why us sitting at the leadership table is important for society to continue wasting their time on judging why this is not important. Let's demonstrate more reason that we come in full force, united, elevating one another. Are we always going to have the same perspective? I hope not. I hope that Lisa brings a different perspective than the voice that Solange brings to the table, just like any leader of all backgrounds and diverse people. But let's make sure that we are a united front, because the more we are united, the stronger we are in one, just creating a safe space for women in leadership. I it breaks my heart when I hear so many women in leadership saying it was a lonely journey and I almost lost my mental health through it. It's not because she wasn't capable, because she faced challenges by herself, being the only woman at the table, and without a supporting environment of no other women elevating her. And I think the more we do that, the more we're going to create spaces for ourselves instead of depending on the little pie that's given for us where only one or two of us can fit in. So that ideology needs to change. And we need to do the hard work on not feeling like we're competing against each other. And if society tells you you're competing against each other, just remind yourself you are not. And if you stick together, when you open that door, you will open it wide enough to make sure that other women will get in there.
Amen to that. And definitely. One of the things that we really need to keep in mind is not to buy into that idea of competition because it's set up that way and it does keep us away from the leadership table. So we need to transcend almost this idea that we need to compete one another, and how do we work together and collaborate to create great spaces for other women? And that could be as simple as, don't give into the temptation to gossip, right? Because that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that really is hurtful. If you see those feelings start to come up, then that's where that emotional regulation takes place. That's self-regulation. That's having to breathe through it and look at, ourselves as leaders, as people. How do we want to show up so that we come through to the place where we can appreciate one another, love one another, and be so happy for one another's success and to watch each other shine. I think that's a super important piece as well. One more thing is for allies. So one of the things I've noticed play out in organizational dynamics is sometimes women get pitted against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's almost done, it's almost orchestrated. You can see it happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we need to be very aware of those games that get played. And I always say, know the game, understand the game, don't play the game. Create your
Yeah.
own fair, kind, caring, strong
Mhm.
game that helps you to get ahead. So,
I always say something, and this year for me in my leadership journey was one of the toughest year, but the greatest year for me. I always say, do not let society redefine your values.
mm,
Know your guiding values and principles.
mm,
And in each situation, assess, does this align with my values? Because when you're quick to react, sometimes you're allowing society to guide how you think, how you feel, and how you act. So we cannot let society redefine our values. And also, as we talk about emotion, there's another part, right? One part was anger is also an emotion, fear, and all that, right? But also on the other part, I've seen myself cry in certain situation, and I took a second and I had a moment of gratitude. And I said, I am so grateful that I still get to feel this because it means that I still care about humanity. And
mm,
may I never lose this feeling of loving people, leading with so much kindness and respect for people.
mm,
That to me showed me that those emotions, I don't have to cry in a meeting or in an office, but if I got home and it was a tough day, someone either treated me a certain way or did something that just did not make the world better and it affects me, I say, I am grateful that I still get to feel for humanity because it reminds me that as a leader, I'm in touch with humanity. And therefore, my leadership will continue to be guided by humanity.
mm,
So I stopped being apologetic or ashamed for having emotions. I am so grateful. I'm grateful that I still have meetings with leaders, whether it's a deputy minister or a CEO of the largest global company. And if they're a great human being, and I say, I am sending you so much love today. I am grateful that I still have the heart to tell a leader that I love them
mm.
because in so many spaces, we've removed that. And today it's paid off because even during my hardest years, those are the leaders out of nowhere that would say, how are you doing? And I said, ha, I love that because it means that if I was not in this world today, there's more than just my husband, my children, and my parents who would miss me.
Hmm.
And that inspires me to get out of any hardship to move forward. So, and especially, and now when you talk about not playing the game, just play your own game. Really. For me, I always look at it, I wake up and I say, how will I make the world better for myself as a human? So I take a moment for me. How will I make the world better for women? So I do some work, of course, with Elevate International, whether it's creating strategies or having meetings to help more women advance. And then I say, how will I make the world for all people? And I align it with those actions. So when I, as a leader, I'm acceptance that I have a gift, but also there are many leaders around me who have gifts. And collectively, when we unite them, we elevate society for the greater good and for the better. So as women, if we know that what's meant for us will flourish and thrive, and what is meant for others, we need to celebrate it and bring it in, then we're just changing the world on a whole new level.
I love so much of that. Thank you for sharing it in that way and reframing it in such a beautiful way because these conversations are not talked about enough. We don't talk about
No.
these feelings. And really at the heart of it, we need to, as women leaders, get in touch with all that that's going on below the surface and working our way through it together and figuring it out. And I really love the way that you reframed, when you're crying and you're expressing your emotion in that way, how you're grateful for it. And I agree. We need to not apologize for the way we express or process our emotions. And those tears are tears of strength. They could be tears of joy, sometimes
Mhm.
tears of anger. All those emotions are messengers, and they're telling us and guiding us to really self-reflect and guide us in how we want to show up in the world. to show up with gratitude and love. Absolutely. We need, and that's a huge thing that's missing right now in organizations and society. It's getting better in some areas, but to admit that human beings, and at the end of the day, what human beings want and need is to be loved. It's basically
Mhm.
a child needing that, and we need that through into our entire experience, all the way to the day we pass on, you know?
Yeah.
And that's
Hmm.
what can unify us, is that it doesn't matter what your background is, what you've experienced or whatnot. That's one common thing that really most of us, the large majority of us, have a need, is for that love. So how do we use um our capability to express that, to elevate one another?
Yeah. And have you ever seen how corporate strategies that are built during a time where a corporation has a culture of love and unity always thrive the greatest for a
Mm-hmm.
long time? Sometimes an organization can have a corporate strategy that they created, we needed to pivot, and like there's these hardcore emotions of like, we need to make money, we need to, right, instead of focusing on, oh, how are we going to serve society? So sometimes even a corporate strategy that's built on these like hardcore that have no like human connection, they might thrive for a minute, but then you go back and I'm sure you think of it, and you and I have had this conversation. You go back and you think, oh yeah, what happened to that company? There was a time when they had this like brilliant marketing strategy and it was everywhere, but the last 5 years, I don't know where they are. But then there are companies, right? When they created some of the greatest corporate strategies, their leaders were in sync, their organizations were in sync, people were united, and they created this beautiful thing as if it's like a letter to the world in their own unique way. And today, you still think about those organizations and you think about some of the things they did, the moments they served community, even if it's an industry that you have nothing to do with, but you still remember them for the impact they made or how they became successful. And I always think to the regular leader that has grown in this sort of society of like hardcore, just what are the facts, what's the best, what's the bottom line, what do we need to achieve, and right. I always try to transform them and transport them in this new era of, imagine if your people were united, you will create a legacy for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I advocate so much for women's leadership at the table, because when you do not have diversity at the table, you're missing some key elements in the fabric of this society that's meant to help you design and execute something that will serve all people. And therefore, you will all succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So, this idea of, well, is it about women? Is it about skill? And sometimes people confuse that. They're like, well, we don't just want women at the table because they're women. We want skills. Oh, there are many incredible,
Right,
impeccable
right.
skills
Yeah,
from women.
yeah.
And if you bring that together, there are different elements that you're going to get, and you're going to create something different and beautiful for the entire world, because you won't have left out certain people in our society.
Hmm. That's right. And there's so much wisdom in what you shared about how we can basically start to establish. And I say, because I mean, we've taken some steps back in some areas in the last couple of years.
Mm.
So I use the word establish. Let's establish a new way of bringing what's worked in the past with us, and now really refining our approaches, being more aware, more conscious, more intentional about bringing women to the table, and to realize as women, and I like what you said earlier, we need to create those spaces, not just wait for to be given those spaces. We need to be part of that and to create those opportunities for one another. And yes, it benefits everyone. Men, it benefits you, it benefits anyone. And
Children, the
children,
next generation of leaders.
no matter how you identify, it benefits everyone because really, when we have a heart to do good for humanity, that's what it is, right? And then when we open our mouth and our voice comes out and it's about helping everyone, and we have the proper support in place, supporting each other, having allies to help support us, then it happens. And when it does, there's nothing better. So now let's get back to Elevate International, Solange. So tell us a little bit more about, you know, where things are at now. Where do you see it going? What's coming up in the future, and how this beautiful vision will help women and girls internationally.
Yeah, so I see Elevate as this beautiful space where leaders get to come together and share ideas and perspective on how we can all advance, but also focusing on intentionally making sure that more women are part of the leadership table. On one idea, of course, we want women to continue to know that there is a safe space for them where they can thrive as leaders. And I know some of this terminology we say safe space is like, oh my gosh. But honestly, safe space is really important when you're navigating as a woman or an equity deserving person. When you're navigating leadership by yourself, you need a space that holds you together so you can thrive. So, one, I want Elevate International to be that space where women feel like their leadership can be unique, authentic, and powerful in any way they feel, and it's still going to be recognized and valued in our society. And two, where all our champions and allies are also celebrated. Because I don't think that we can advance women if we're not recognizing all the incredible leaders in our society who are committed and passionate about advancing all people in our society. So I never wanted it to be a space for women, by women, only with women. I wanted it to be a space for incredible leaders doing amazing things in the world, elevating more women to advance as leaders. And also transcending to how do we inspire more girls to trust and believe that they're leaders? The 11-year-old Solanges that are sitting in the middle of a refugee camp thinking, what does the future hold for me? Whatever you're dreaming, that there will be a society and a group of people that will elevate them. So I think for us having those leadership, the sponsorship and championing of women in leaders and the mentorship of young girls is important for Elevate International. In the future, I would just love to see all nations united every year to talk about the incredible difference that they're making in the world and how they're advancing more women to be part of that change our society is creating. That's what I envision for Elevate International.
Such a beautiful vision. And I think you're the right person to make it happen, Solange,
Oh,
to lead the way together with the beautiful community you've brought together and which is growing. So how can people reach you?
So elevateinternational.ca for those that are in Canada. For those that are international, it's elevateinternationalorg.com. You can volunteer with us. You can be part of the leadership group, such as Lisa here, who is part of our executive advisors, who just help us build some of the most amazing strategies to serve this world. And you can be a member of Elevate and join us for all events. And soon we will be launching our champion program where more women will be championed and sponsored in all sectors. And we hope more women will apply to be part of it and more champions and allies will join us as mentors.
Who would be your ideal mentor or champion if anyone out there is listening and they'd like to join in?
So mentors and champions and is anybody at the CEO and VP level or within government? Of course, it's the deputy ministers and the senior associate deputy minister, leaders that are the highest stable of leadership within their organizations and corporations. We are more than happy and grateful to welcome them because we genuinely believe that the more incredible leaders we have who are sponsoring and championing women in leaders, the more women will advance in a safe, healthy environment that will help them and encourage them to thrive authentically.
Well, thank you so much, Solange. Any last words of advice or wisdom?
Uh, I would say if you're a leader that has any young woman in your life, make sure you take a moment today and ask them what they want to be when they grow up or something they think about, and ask that regularly. It will change, but always encourage them to speak up and to share their voice. If you are a woman in leadership, please take a moment to reflect on how you thriving as a leader will genuinely make the world better. I always say that if more women are part of the decision makers, we get to think about the decisions that are made in our society, in our corporation, how that can help. And world hunger, how that can help, and malnutrition, how that can end more people dying in this world, save the environment. Just keep thriving as a leader because your leadership is so needed today. And if you are a champion and an ally, I am grateful for you. Please keep unapologetically championing change and welcoming change and never allow the world to define your values.
Mm, love you so much, Solange, and
Love
thank
you.
you again for joining us on Lil Talks.
Thank you.